Starting us off at number 10 is an abandoned carnival. Now, I have always known carnivals to be very upbeat and happy places, but I think it's safe to say after toxic radiation, they ain't so fun. Just 1.25 miles away from the Chernobyl power plant is the small town of Pripyat. Pripyat was the town where most workers at Chernobyl lived and raised their families prior to the famous blast. Obviously, that is not the case anymore. What is now left of this once popular carnival is a decaying Ferris wheel, bumper cars surrounded by overgrown vines, and an old rusty skeleton of a merry-go-round. It is said that the amusement park was set to open on May 1st, just 5 days after the Chernobyl incident occurred, but the people of Pripyat needed something to do while the reactor was melting down, so the town opened up the amusement park on April 27th. How charming. Nothing more sweet and fun than you and your family enjoying a beautiful Ferris wheel ride that sweeps in and out of toxic radiation. It's the little things in life.
In our ninth spot today, we have the ghosts. A number of people lost their lives over this terrible disaster, and it's believed that their souls are still around, haunting Pripyat. This one story in particular will give you the chills. It was told by nuclear physicist Andrei Karsukov. He visited the area in 1997 and claims he encountered a ghost. So when he arrived, he went to the power station and went to the number 4 reactor. That's where the explosion occurred. Now, he was there taking radiation readings when all of a sudden he heard someone screaming for rescue from a fire coming from inside. He said that it was impossible for someone to be inside of the old reactor room. For starters, the door requires a password and a handprint. And not only that, it would have tripped an alarm if someone managed to get inside. Yet, the screaming was clearly coming from inside. It sounded like someone was desperately trying to escape. So he might have heard the ghostly cries from someone who lost their life in the power plant explosion. Isn't that scary? I think so.
Number 8, silhouettes of missing townspeople. Before I go any further on this one, let me just say that these silhouettes are not actually of real people left after the blast. A couple of sneaky and daring graffiti artists said to be from Germany and Belarus snuck into the radiation zone and thought it would be a good idea to spray paint silhouettes of people who once lived in this beautiful little community. So these pieces more or less resemble what once was rather than resembling actual humans from the town. That being said, there are some unique silhouettes through the radiation zone, such as a little girl with pigtails reaching for a light switch in a random abandoned room. Somewhere outside, a boy pulling a truck towards a corner of the building, as well as silhouettes of random people dancing, and to finish it off, a small group of children jumping together in terror of the blast. Pretty morbid, if you ask me. Whether these silhouettes are based on specific real people or not, these random silhouettes are definitely a haunting thing to see, and I don't want to see them.
Coming in at number 7, we have the Bloody Red. The Bloody Red, or the Red Forest, is the name given to the forest area around Chernobyl. Why is it called that? Well, this area received a lot of radiation fallout. As a result, the trees turned this bright orange color and then died. Nowadays, not a single tree can grow there anymore. In fact, this area is considered the most radioactive land area on the planet. Yes, on the planet. Obviously, as a result, the 400 hectares of land are off limits. It's strictly prohibited to go in there. I mean, duh, unless you have a death wish and want to die from exposure to radiation. What's also scary is that in 2015 a fire broke out in the forest, and even more radioactive material was released from this burning. So yeah, that forest is a big no-go zone. Also, could they have given it a creepier name like the Bloody Red? Really? Really?
Coming in at number 6 are piles of creepy dolls. Creepy dolls! I have seen plenty of horror films in my time, and nothing creeps me out more than a creepy, probably possessed old doll. All through Pripyat, piles of dolls and doll heads can be seen in the randomest of places. Everywhere from windowsills, piles of debris, bed frames, tree branches, literally everywhere. Now, some of these dolls may be left over from the blast, but odds are they are all placed there by cheeky horror fans wanting to place their own touch on the Chernobyl site. Some of these are even propped up in specific poses with gas masks on. Annabelle, if you're watching this, you stay in your glass box. You got that?
We are now at our 5th and halfway mark with the Hospital of Death. This is said to be the deadliest hospital on the planet. So after the nuclear disaster, this hospital began quickly filling up with a number of sick and injured citizens. Nowadays though, obviously the hospital is abandoned. But the basement of the hospital contains a dark secret. In the basement, there are piles of first responders' clothing. These clothings belonged to the first responders like the firemen, who were on the scene immediately after the explosion. Obviously, the clothing they wore when they rushed into the building is now highly contaminated, and still to this day emit dangerously high levels of radiation. So they were just dumped in the basement because they didn't know where else to get rid of it. In fact, the radiation in this building is 4,000 times higher than normal. It's crazy.
Number 4, radiation-eating fungus. In the words of Jeff Goldblum, life finds a way. Currently, there is a fungus growing inside the damaged 4th reactor of Chernobyl where radiation levels are still insanely high. Discovered by scientists back in 2002, this fungus, when tested, showed that when exposed to higher ionizing radiation, it would actually grow faster. What happened to the tested fungus after? Who knows? Either way, I do wish I could have been there to test it with the other scientists because I hear they were some pretty fun guys. I'll show myself out.
In our third spot today, we have the mutated animals. The Chernobyl nuclear disaster had devastating, lasting effects. The nuclear material leaked into the soil, contaminating food and water. In fact, the radioactive materials leaked into pastures and was eaten by cows, and then was later found in their milk that children were drinking. But let's talk more about these farm animals that were affected. There were tons of weird mutated animals born near the disaster zone after this incident. Pigs, goats, and horses were born with messed up faces and extra limbs, or were just weird colors. Nowadays, there's a lot of stray dogs that roam the area. Sadly, because of their exposure to the radiation, they don't live a long life, and they may have a number of health issues.
Coming in at number 2 is quite possibly the strangest but most obvious thing you will find in all of Chernobyl. Tourists! Apparently, around 12,000 tourists visit the exclusion zone every single year. One tourism company promises 11 hours of excitement with a respirator and a dosimeter included. There are even some nearby hotels that request you leave your radioactive shoes outside and don't bring them into the hotel with you once you return. No matter how safe or unsafe you think it is to visit the exclusion zone, quite obviously thousands of people from around the world go and visit every single year. Honestly, it does seem kind of cool, and I'm sure there's a gift shop somewhere that sells shirts that say, I went all the way to Chernobyl and all I got was this shirt and an extra thumb. I'd buy that. Hey Lizzie, you want to go to Chernobyl with me?
No.
Okay.
And in our number 1 spot today, we have the Stalkers. This is absolutely insane. I don't think you guys are ready for this one. But the Stalkers is the name given to a group of Russians and Ukrainians that romanticize the apocalyptic environment of Pripyat. They sneak into abandoned buildings and explore them. Sometimes they even sleep over there. Also, to make matters weirder, they bring a gauger counter to see how much radiation they were exposed to on their journeys. Not only that, but apparently they also like to eat the fruit that grows in the danger zone. Like, this is their definition of fun, and they just love it. I highly recommend you don't do this, for a number of obvious reasons. But like I said, the Stalkers love this.
Coming in at number 10, we have the Smilers. This is a popular urban legend from many big cities, but it was especially widely circulated in the 2000s in Brussels. The story goes that a woman would walk home on her own, only to be confronted by a gang or a single but very threatening man. The man would hold her at knife point and would offer the option of being or smiling forever. A tough choice, as the ladies often knew what they meant when they said smile forever. Obviously though, if it's a choice, you choose the smiling. The Smilers are women who walk around the city with scars from their mouths to their ears. They chose smile, which meant their faces were slashed. Coming into number 9, we have the vending machine. At the University Libre de Brussels, which is located, obviously, in Brussels, there's an urban legend going around that a former student got their arms stuck in a vending machine mechanism and had to have it amputated. Ugh. It seems that the student's snack got stuck, so they tried to reach in and grab their food, but it got stuck and horribly mangled in the machine. But they ended up having to lose their arm. While this may be circulated in Brussels, I feel like this isn't necessarily unique to Belgium. I've heard this kind of urban legend before, especially from parents who don't want their kids getting stuck. Honestly, I think when it comes to vending machines, the bigger risk would it be falling on you when you kick it because your coke hasn't come out. Coming into number 8, we have the Buck Riders. The Buck Riders. They're a very old Belgian legend indeed. They're ghosts or demons or a demonic presence that rode through the sky on the back of flying goats gifted to them by Satan. Of all of the sentences I thought I would say today. In 1774, a man by the name of Jean van Musan claimed to be a buck rider and threatened a farmer, blackmailing him for money. It seems that a genuine gang of thieves operated in this time in East Belgium and the southern part of the Netherlands. These gangs would raid farms and peaceful communities. Now, some of the raiders were caught and admitted to being a satanic buck rider. As a result, they were sentenced to death. Coming into number 7, we have the scent of Brussels. This urban legend crops up over both France and Belgium, especially in cities like Paris and Brussels. The stories often take place in busy streets, a kind of busy, bustling European street you could expect to find in the mid-19th century. A woman would be lured by market sellers offering her cut-price perfumes. She'd then follow them down an alley to smell their wares. Wait, that sounds pretty dirty. Ooh. Anyway, she would follow them and they would get her to smell perfume, but in actuality, it turned out to be chloroform, which would knock her out cold. The story branches off, but in the best case scenario for the woman, it's just her purse that's stolen. In the worst, generally she's raped. Coming into number 6, we have the Hitcher with hairy hands. This is a really weird urban legend, like super weird. The story goes that a woman is returning from a movie theater and gets back into her car, parked in a dark parking lot. As she goes to drive off, she notices a little old lady in the back seat. Confused, she's like, "Hey, old lady, what are you doing in the back of my car?" She notices that the old lady is kinda weepy, and the woman responds that actually she got lost when seeing a film with her grandson and got scared alone in the car park. She asked if she could have a lift home. Who refuses a little lost old lady? The driver takes pity on her and decides to drive her home, but at one point the old lady gestures that she wants the driver to turn left and she shows part of her hand and arm. The driver notices that actually she's mysteriously hairy. Casting a few peeks into the rearview mirror, she notices that the woman's hands were very hairy, kinda manly hairy. It isn't long before the driver realizes that actually the little old lady is a man in disguise. Panicked, she sees a bus and decides to crash into it. She runs to the bus driver to ask him for help. When she gets back to the car, this so-called old lady has vanished. When the police come later, they investigate the car and find chloroform and chainsaws in the back. Basically, the story goes that actually the Butcher of Mons was suspected to have been in the area and the driver could have been the next victim. So speaking of the Butcher of Mons, this is actually one of those urban legends that's true, but has sparked all kinds of other chatter. I think we should talk about it at number 5. So the Butcher of Mons was a very real Belgian was active between January 1996 and July 1997 near the Belgian city of Mons. The killer murdered women and chopped them up, placing them in plastic bags and leaving them in visible locations along highways and such. The parts in the bags belonged to a number of different women, all from the Knockheist region. The bags, 12 in total, showed up between March 1997 and April 1998, with all 5 murder victims eventually identified. The women were all aged between 22 to 42. Despite decades of investigation, the murderer has never been apprehended, which has obviously left imaginations to run wild over that part of Europe. Less dark, still scary, still in Mons. At number 4, we have the Angel of Mons. The Angel of Mons is an old World War I tale from the Battle of Mons. Now, during the First World War, much of Belgium was dug up for trenches, and the country became a very tightly fought battleground. It was the gateway to the rest of the West. One such famous battle was the Battle of Mons itself, which took place at the onset of war in August 1914. Now, it seems that British soldiers came under fire from a surprise attack from the German troops and found themselves cornered. It seems that when the situation seemed very dire, many soldiers believed that they saw winged creatures in the sky. Somehow the British managed to win the battle, and the legend goes that this is because angels came down along with St. George, the patron saint of England. They came down to fend off the Grey Army and lead a British victory. Another war legend up next. Could this have been the origin of George R.R. Martin's White Walkers? Maybe. They're coming into number 3. So this legend legend is often referred to as the legend of the White Cavalry. In 1918, a British captain, Captain Hayward, saw a band of Germans throwing grenades and shooting at an empty piece of land. After fighting the empty space, they fled, obviously terrified. Now the English soldiers captured them and questioned them about the strange battle. It seems that they were convinced that they were fighting a strange army in white riding white horses. They described these men as being death-like. Was this just a hallucination of war, or was there something else going on? Coming into number 2, we have the needles. Back in the 1980s, at the height of people's fear of HIV, there was scaremongering, vicious rumors circulated that people were leaving contaminated blood needles in seats at movie theaters. Now the most discussed theater is the UGC de Brugge. The legend said that a madman would leave HIV-infected needles in chairs, and then when you went to investigate, there'd be a note saying, "Welcome to the world of HIV." Honestly, awful. Awful, but pretty untrue. I can't find any reference to this actually ever happening. It's just an awful AIDS scare and a popular urban legend. Finally, coming into number 1, a classic ghost story, we have the eyes. Always a spooky forest and an urban legend video. Classic urban legend. So the eyes is the more frequently used name for a spirit called De Oggen. This is a malicious force that haunts the Sonian forest at the southeast edge tip of Brussels. De Oggen, or the eyes, is said to be one large foggy shadow, followed by smaller foggy shadows. The legend began in 1937 when nearby nuns started finding burned bodies of young children in the forest, although the exact number of deaths and the truth of the tale is pretty sketchy. Either way, if you come across a fog in the forest, you may want to get out of there for fear of being taken away and murdered by the eyes. Ooh.
And at number 10, we have the Loch Ness Monster. Everyone's been talking about this Loch Ness Monster. Has anyone actually seen it? Nessie is a lake creature that is said to lurk in the depths of Loch Ness in the Scottish Highlands. This lake is notorious for being murky and frigid, which is perfect for a creature like this. The Loch Ness Lake is up to 755 feet deep, which gives Nessie plenty of place to hide. For years, there have been so much debate on whether or not the Loch Ness Monster actually exists. There are even people who have said that they've seen the creature with their own eyes, and then of course there are all those pictures on the internet. But as it turns out, Nessie might be real after all. A major scientific study was conducted to find out the truth. Scientists from New Zealand took DNA from creatures that have lived in the lake. When they analyzed the samples, they found out that there might be evidence that the Loch Ness Monster really does exist. Hundreds of thousands of people travel to Loch Ness every single year in hopes that they're going to be able to catch a glimpse of Nessie himself. And you know what, maybe one day we can say for certain if, it actually exists or not. Next up, number 9, we have the Black Shuck. Take a look at this thing. The Black Shuck is a ghostly looking creature that resembles a huge black dog, except it has devilish red or green eyes. According to local reports, the Black Shuck is known to lurk in the countryside of East Anglia in England. But be careful, if you spot this beast, it is believed that you will die shortly after, or you'll become seriously sick. But one thing is for certain, if you manage to look this creature in the eye, you will for sure die. According to one old town legend, in 1577, this giant hellhound killed 2 people who were outside of a church, and then just 12 miles away, it killed 2 more people. Clearly this thing is more terrifying than Cujo, and I really hope this monster doesn't actually exist, but unfortunately I can't say for certain that it doesn't. Number 8, domovoi. Let me take you guys over to Russia, where they believe that every house has a domovoi. These are small hairy creatures that are barely seen, but everyone believes that they're probably living behind your stove. I couldn't believe this one. Well, the goal of the domovoi is to maintain order and peace throughout your house. So basically, if you treat them with respect, they will help you out with chores, but if you act rudely, violently, or if you are messy, the domovoi will resort to poltergeist activities and they'll really mess things up for you. They might wake you up in the middle of the night, break things, or disturb your sleep. If you don't keep up with their demands, they will basically make your life a living hell and wreak havoc on you and your home. They say that when people die in their sleep or from natural causes, it was actually the domovoi killing them. Yeah, I'd probably make sure that you mop and turn the dishwasher on tonight. I don't think any of us want the domovoi to get really upset. Loup-garou makes it onto this list at number 7. This is the French version of the werewolf that I am so pronouncing the name wrong. However, it is much more sinister. This creature can change from a human into a wolf whenever it wants, and unlike a typical werewolf, it doesn't depend on the moon's phases. So basically this thing can terrorize and hurt humans whenever they feel like it. When the loup-garou transforms into a werewolf, they are still able to think and rationalize like humans, so this ability makes them incredibly smart and way more dangerous. Oh, and get this, they can also turn into a dog, calf, pig, cat, or even owl. So because of this, humanoid creature is able to transform into a bunch of different animals. How can you rule out its existence? The simple answer is we cannot. Next up, number 6, we have Quadramentian. This scary creature is believed to be living in the lakes and seas throughout the Luxembourg. He is said to be lurking in the water, and he will spare children who come too close. Remind me to never go swimming in Luxembourg ever. But wait, there's more horror to this story. It doesn't end there. Apparently he can also appear in bathrooms, bathtubs, and toilets. I mean, wait, what? Is this real life right now? What are you doing lurking in the toilet? Do you know what I'm about to do? They are also known to be extremely aggressive, and they will stalk their victims until they have dragged them beneath the water. Pretty terrifying if you ask me. They carry a large spear that they use to impale their victims, and people believe that this hideous creature is the reason behind a lot of the unexplained drownings that happen in the lake and seas in Luxembourg. The Krakenot's tail takes us up to number 5 on our list. This terrifying creature is pretty similar to the Yeti, except it's believed that he lives in the mountain between Czech Republic and Poland. Apparently he is extremely unpredictable, and you never know if he's going to ignore you or if you'll become his next snack. According to this folklore, one day he could choose to send an avalanche your way, or he could decide to save you from freezing temperatures. So if this hairy beast is actually alive, then it's probably a good idea to just avoid him at all costs. Oh, and the Krakenotch is known to target unsuspecting hikers in the area, and he will always use force of nature to carry out his evil deeds. And now at number 4, we're talking about the Strigoi, which comes from Romania. Alright guys, brace yourselves because this next creature looks like my absolute nightmare coming to life. The Strigoi are actually pretty similar to vampires because they like to roam the streets at night, and they are also known as supernatural creatures. But are these things just scary monsters from folklore, or could they be real? The thing about the Strigoi is that they're able to shapeshift into any creature that they want. So locating them or hunting them would be next to impossible. I guess it would also be impossible to know whether or not they exist. And also they can make themselves invisible, so what do they crave the most? Yeah, you guessed it, it's blood. Actually back in 2004, a Romanian girl claimed that she was visited by a Strigoi, and it took the form of her dead uncle, so the family dug up his grave, cut his heart out, and burned it. And yeah, I guess that's the most logical thing to do. It's kind of weird. I don't recommend any of you guys doing that because that is absolutely wrong. And now at number 3, we have vampires from Eastern Europe. A scary European creature list could not be complete without some good old-fashioned vampires. Whenever I think of vampires, I'm thinking, you know, sharp fangs, their insatiable desire for blood, and their extremely cold and pale skin, and they sleep upside down. But are they just a myth? Or could real vampires be roaming the earth looking to sink their fangs in unexpected humans? I'm not gonna rule anything out. I mean, anything is plausible, right? Do you guys know how many people have reported seeing a vampire? Well, there are too many to count. So could all of them be making this up? I probably believe that there are some scary cannibalistic humans out there, but I don't know if I can get on board with real life vampires. But let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. Are vampires real? Number 2 takes us over to Precoliki in Romania. For those of you guys who aren't aware, Precoliki is basically a terrifying giant wolf that is hungry for some human flesh. And yeah, I didn't know what they were either. I did the Google search thing. Well, it is said that violent men become Precoliki after they die so that they can continue harming other humans. But many people believe in Romania, well, they have claimed that they were viciously attacked by an abnormal, large and strong wolf. It's also said that these wolves attack silently and unexpectedly. Victims of these attacks also say that these wolves aren't ordinary wolves. So what are they? Well, they are something much more sinister, larger, and aggressive. That's why that there is a strong belief in Russia. There's a myth of the Prokoliki could actually be a harsh reality, and if we aren't careful, then these things could easily kill us off, like one by one. And now number 1, we have the Fear-Liath. This is the name that is given to a 10-foot tall humanoid creature that haunts the second tallest mountain in Scotland. So if you love to hike, and you're in Scotland, I'd recommend hiking either the 3rd tallest or the tallest mountain in Scotland. This hairy creature is known to cause an uncontrollable feeling of anxiety or panic among hikers who are near him. The first recorded sighting by a scientist was way back in 1890. He was so scared for his life that he didn't tell anyone about his encounter until 1925, which is 35 years later. But once he did, he discovered that others had the same experience he did. He realized that the Fear-Liath might actually be real, and he could be terrorizing and brutally killing hikers in Scotland. So hikers beware.
Starting us off at number 10 are Lytuvans. This urban legend is from Latvian folklore, and Lytuvans are said to be the souls of a killed person, meaning if you were murdered, hanged, drowned, you could be one of these Lytuvans. These souls are cursed to remain on Earth as long as their fate permits them to, and in some parts of Latvia they believe they're the souls of unbaptized children, so it really depends on the version you grew up with. They're meant to be extremely dangerous, and I'm not surprised. I mean, if I was stuck on Earth for centuries when I didn't want to be, I'd start causing shit as well. I think anyone would. They've been known to attack domestic animals and humans, and a common method for them is sleep paralysis. They strangle us in our sleep, but you can escape the attack if you move the toe on your left foot. Oddly specific, but facts are facts, guys. You'd think you'd be safe if you just locked the doors before bed, but wrong again. They can fit through keyholes and slits under doors, so you're out of luck there as well. Looks wise, they appear as labored, small but fast children. Very rarely do they look like ugly witch-like women, but they can. The deaths they cause are painful, you guys, and I kid you not. The victim loses all their strength, they get super tired, they're basically drowning in sweat, and they can't move since the Lytuvan is lying on top of them, and with that you slowly lose the ability to breathe, bit by bit, until your heart stops beating. Coming in at number 9 is the Lake Somin monster. Located in Lake Somin in the village of Lukiv in Ukraine, this monster is meant to be 30 feet long with the body of a crocodile and the head of a snake. He makes this deep wheezing, groaning sound that vibrates throughout the whole lake, and he lives deep within the underwater caves. He lies waiting for his victims at night and dusk and comes out of the lake to drag his victims to their deaths. They can eat horses, humans, sheep, cats, dogs, anything. The first story about the monster was before World War I, where a village leader refused to pay his fishing taxes because he thought there was a strange serpent in the lake. Everyone was terrified, and an expedition was even launched but was called off when the war started. Stories arose again during World War II of a crocodile-like beast, and another expedition began, but no creature was ever found. At number 8 we have the gnome king Kyrie. According to this Dutch urban legend, Kyrie was the king of all the gnomes that live in North Brabant in the Netherlands. From their base they travelled quite a bit, and legend has it King Kyrie lived on Gnome Mountain, ironically also known as Devil's Mountain. I was gonna try saying it in the actual Dutch word, but I knew I would just completely bottle it, so I just didn't even bother. The gnomes weren't evil, surprisingly. They would help farmers in their homes as well as people in other villages. They hated being seen, so would only travel at night, but if you were unfortunate enough to see a gnome, they'd have you for it. One farmer who apparently saw them was made blind in one eye just for glancing at them. The king ended up being shot by a hunter in the 1950s, and a statue of him was actually erected in the village they lived in called Hoglone. I know I said that wrong, but I really tried. Filling our number 7 slot is Peikko. This urban legend comes from Finland, and I'm so happy to include this one because I've literally seen so many comments asking for Finnish urban legends, so at least I can semi-make it happen for you guys. And I don't know if I saw a lot of comments or just the same users commenting the same thing. But anyway, Peikko is said to be a massive creature similar to a giant who can turn invisible at will, change size at will, sleep in the form of a rocky landform, form for hundreds of years, and worst of all, he's been known to make holes in children's teeth. Since every country has their own version of the boogeyman, the Peiko is Finland's inspired version of it. He kidnaps children, and do we really need to go into what he does with them? Like, I think we all know. Let's just skip the atrocities. We don't have to talk about that. We don't. I don't need to imagine that, neither do you. Now at number 6 is the Enchanted Moura. Hailing from Portugal, the legend of the Enchanted Moura is very popular in local folklore there. Moura is an extremely beautiful and seductive shapeshifter that lives under an occult spell that was put on her against her will. She lives in places that represent boundaries like gates and doorways and can build with incredible strength. She usually shows up combing her hair and singing. Sometimes her hair is blonde, sometimes it's black, and if you promise to help set her free, she promises to give you treasure in return. These magical maidens were said to be the souls of the girls left behind to guard the treasure their partners hid before going to Moura. They guard castles and rivers and are actually not evil. I know most female urban legend appearances are evil, but I mean, they're pretty okay. I don't want to confuse people, it isn't one person, there's many versions of this Enchanted Moura. There's many maidens. It's not just one, but they're all Moura. I'm gonna stop talking now. Coming in at number 5 is the Dancing Policeman. This urban legend may be one of the most well-known ghosts in all of Serbia. Back in the 60s, at the busiest intersection in Belgrade worked traffic policeman Jova Bull. Every day he wore a full white uniform. I'm talking white gloves, white hat, white everything. And his hand gestures were so elegant it was almost artistic. It was like a dance. Watchers were left breathless. It was like he was conducting a ballet, not Cars. His face and smile drew you in, and it's like he was everything you wanted no matter who you were. If you violated regulations, he'd just wag a finger, and he'd even blow kisses at people. He stole the hearts of so many he started appearing on TV and in the newspaper. The mayor of London even invited him to London after seeing him once, not even meeting him. He was less liked in London since his movements weren't as feminine as his counterparts, and the authorities also hated him. He didn't want to rise up, he just loved his job and wanted to keep at it. Even after being moved to a less busy intersection, he drew people in. In the end, the authorities had enough of him and made him retire early, and he died as the keeper of a small parking lot. They say you can see his spirit hover in the Belgrade intersection and the London one like an invisible ballet dancer. Honestly, this is a ghost I'd actually like to see. He seems very unproblematic and not scary. And I like a good traffic controller. I like nice traffic. Bad drivers are a no. At number 4 is the Petrin Fire. This urban legend is from the Czech Republic and it centers around Petrin Hill. Nowadays it's a lovely park and garden where you can go for a nice date or romantic stroll, but being there at night is a lot more of a risk. Despite its reputation today, there used to be a pagan grove on the hill in the middle of a group of lime trees. In the middle of this grove was a huge sacrificial altar where it said the pagan priests used to burn young virgins for their gods. When Prince Boleslav came to power, he radically went after the pagans, and their altar and grove were both destroyed and a church was built nearby instead. But the pagan faith was more resilient than that. It wasn't just gonna go away because this altar was destroyed. The pagan gods made themselves known on the hill by creating random fires that would magically contain themselves. But they weren't just fires. If people looked inside them, they would see the grimacing faces of all the pagans the prince had killed. And these fires are still happening till this day at night. They happen at random times and can last for around 20 minutes. If any of you subs are from Czech Republic and are watching this, can you let me know if you've seen these fires? I really need to know. Thank you. Filling at number 3 slot is the house on Rataskäivu Street. This one comes from Estonia and follows the story of a house located on Rataskäivu Street. The man who lived there was trash. Honestly, he wasted all of his money and honestly had no future, and on top of that he was heavily in debt. One night he thought enough was enough. Life didn't seem worth living anymore, and so he tried to commit suicide. Just as he was about to do it, a stranger broke into his room asking for one thing. Let the man get married on the top floor of his house, and if he agreed, he would be rich beyond his dreams. But there was one condition: no one could eavesdrop on this wedding. If they did, it would cost the man his money and the eavesdropper their life. And did I mention the stranger was the devil himself? Sorry, I should have included that earlier, but you know, I like the build up. Anyway, the night of the wedding, the guests arrived, but you couldn't see them. You could hear them, but they were invisible, enjoying the festivities somewhere in the ether. The lights were on, the music was playing, the house was shaking like the weight of the guests was overloading it. As it became 1 a.m., everything stopped. Everything was silent. The man was expecting his fortune, but as he was making his way upstairs, his butler got sick and died. He'd been eavesdropping on the wedding, and we knew what would happen if that happened, guys. We were forewarned. That room of the house that he died in is said to be walled up now, and the window facing the street is also boarded up. Never make a deal with the devil, people. It literally never ends well. Ever. Did I mention ever? Because it doesn't. How many videos of this do I have to make? No deal with the devil. Thank you. Now at number 2 is the pastor's wife. This legend is pretty tragic, I'm not gonna lie, and it hails all the way from Denmark. Way back when, a woman married a pastor, but she was hiding a massive secret. Under no circumstances ever did she ever want kids, so much so, she found a witch who told her she was gonna have 7 kids in the future. The witch gave her 7 stones to throw into a well, and that would prevent all the pregnancies. She did it and resumed normal life. Her and the pastor went for a walk one night, and he realized his wife didn't have a shadow. Everyone has a shadow, why the hell doesn't she? He realized she must have done something horrifically evil for this to happen and tried getting her to confess to him, but she refused. He kicked her out of their house and forced every villager to refuse her. He cursed her by saying it's more likely a red rose would grow out of his stone dining room table than for her to redeem herself. Harsh words. Absolutely crushed, the woman left the village and found a priest in another village nearby. He said to redeem herself she had to stay in the church overnight with a book he had given her, and that she can't give the book to anyone no matter what because many will be asking for it. And he was right. That night she was haunted and spat on by all the kids she would have had. They verbally abused her for being so selfish, but she got through it and the next day she was redeemed. But the priest said the only catch now is that you only have 1 day to live. She rushed back to her village hoping to see her husband one last time, but again no one let her in except one kind soul. She died behind an oven in that person's house, and the next day the pastor was heart attack level shocked when he saw a red rose coming out of his stone table. Overcome with heartache, he searched for his wife everywhere, and when he found out she was dead, he went mad and died soon after. I have no words. It hurts me. It hurts me here. And finally, at number 1 is Polodnica. Hailing from Slovakia but appearing in a lot of Slavic folklore, Polodnica is the noon demon, also known as Lady Midday or the Noon Witch. She mostly appears during the summer as a beautiful young woman in white, or an old hag, or even a 12-year-old girl who roams fields in the countryside. She takes the form of dust clouds and then appears literally out of nowhere and is always carrying a pair of shears or a scythe. She'll trick workers on the field by asking them a hard question, and if they answer it wrong, which most of them do, she'll quickly just change the subject and then behead them. Literally savage. She either beheads you, or if she's having a good day, she'll just give you a terminal illness. I don't know which one is better, to be fair. Neither really. One's a sudden death and the other is a slow burner. I don't know which one I'd choose. Which one would you choose? Probably the beheading, I feel. But then, I'd have more time with it. Either way, let me know in the comments. She's known as a personification of getting sunstroke, and her presence has been linked to causing heat stroke in many people now. She causes aches in their neck, and if it's bad, one can even go mad.
Let's kick off this list, number 10, with a domovoi. These creatures are said to protect your home, only if you keep them happy. Over in Russia, it is common belief that every house has a domovoi. These are very small, hairy, ugly creatures that are rarely seen, but they're usually living behind your stove or in dark areas. If you treat these creatures with respect, leave them treats, and say nice things about them, they're going to protect your house. But if you ignore them, leave your house in a mess, or constantly fight with your family, then they will destroy your house or strangle you in your sleep. I don't know about you guys, but if I had a house in Russia, I would keep it the cleanest damn thing ever. So make sure you guys in Russia watching right now, go clean your house. The Greek soldier marches into number 9 on this creepy list. This creepy urban legend originates in Greece, and it is about a Greek soldier from World War II who was captured and brutally executed by other Greeks who disapproved of his political beliefs. He was 5 weeks, and then he was eventually murdered. After his death, stories about a very attractive Greek soldier in uniform would appear and disappear overnight. His goal was to seduce young, beautiful widows or virgins and impregnate them. 5 weeks after the mother gave birth to the baby, he would disappear for good, but he would leave a letter that explained why he disappeared. The letter said that his main goal was to return from the dead in order to spread his seed so that his sons will eventually get vengeance on those who murdered him. I mean, this just sounds so morbid and pretty damn dark. Let's just move on. The hostel urban legend. We're going to be talking about that. It's going to haunt us in at number 8. Have you guys ever seen the movie Hostel? Well, it's about college students who are backpacking through Europe. This is why I'm afraid to backpack. Well, one of their stops was in Amsterdam. They decided to rent a room at a hostel that was known for their partying. Well, they found themselves in a terrible situation full of torture chambers and murderers. So yeah, this movie was inspired by the hostel urban legend in Europe. According to the legend, hundreds of people who backpacked through Europe each year, they would mysteriously just disappear. Some people speculate that they are held in a torture room by a sick and sinister murderer, and others say that they were cut up and had their organs sold for money. A lot of people believe that this urban legend is so true that many of them stay in hotels while in Europe, but I'm starting to think that hotels are the ones that are starting this urban legends to, try to generate more money. The spider bite nibbles onto this list at number 7. This extremely disgusting urban legend surfaced in Europe during the 1970s, but it is still being circulated around the continent even to this day. Basically, this urban legend used people's irrational fear of spiders, and this will discourage them from visiting exotic countries in the south. So this urban legend gave a lot of southern countries a bad reputation that they were either unclean or very unsafe. In the story, a young woman travels to an exotic location for her vacation, but during her trip, her cheeks began to swell, so she decided to cut her trip short and she returned home in order to get some medical treatment. When the doctor examined her cheeks, he inserted something into her cheek that caused a dozen spiders to come out crawling. I mean, is this real life right now? If I saw all those spiders coming out of my cheek, I would probably faint. If not, I hope I would just pass out because there's no way I would be able to handle that situation. According to this legend, a spider had laid eggs under her skin during her vacation, and when the spiders came crawling out, it caused this woman to go insane. Well, can you blame her? I know this is just a story, but it's still pretty scary because you imagine like this could actually happen. The smiley face makes its way onto this list at number 6. Don't be fooled by the name of this urban legend because it isn't a pleasant one. This story was heavily circulated in cities across Belgium in 2002, and it is about a gang or single man who would follow a woman home from the subway and attack her in an abandoned alleyway. The gang or this man would give her a choice. They said that she can either be or smile forever. Seems like there's an obvious choice, so the woman easily picked the second option, but it resulted in her mouth being sliced open at the corners all the way up to her ear that it kind of resembles a clown's smile. I mean, this would be incredibly painful. I couldn't imagine that actually happening to someone. I'd really hope this urban legend is just a legend and it's not actually a true story because this would be a really bad form of torture. The Strigoi bites its way into number 5. Alright, so this urban legend originates in Romania, and I think by that, you'll be able to guess what this urban legend is about. If you guessed vampires, you'd be close. However, the Strigoi are much more intense and hardcore than Dracula will ever be. This urban legend states that the Strigoi are almost like a hybrid between vampires and werewolves. So similar to vampires, they like to stalk the streets at night, but what makes them more powerful is that they're able to shapeshift into any creatures they want. So yeah, basically they're unstoppable. They can also make themselves invisible. Okay, so now that's not even fair. According to one legend, a Romanian girl claimed to have been visited by a Strigoi that took the form of her dead uncle. So the family decided not to take any chances, and they actually dug up his grave, cut his heart out, and burned it. Yeah, I'm not sure if those were the steps that I would take, but I would strongly consider it for sure. The death car crashes onto this list at number 4. This urban legend is famously known in Poland as the Black Volga, and this story originated back in the 1960s and quickly spread throughout Eastern Europe. This legend goes something like this. There is a Black Volga that is driven by evil priests and nuns. Black robbed Satanists, vampires, and even the devil who would abduct people, and then they would be sacrificed to evil spirits. People have claimed that they've seen this car driving around Poland, but instead of having mirrors on the side of his car, it had ram horns. The modern version of this urban legend claims that the Black Volga is driven by gang members or thugs who abduct people in order to harvest their organs and then sell them to the rich, Americans or Arabs who suffer from terminal illnesses. So the moral of this story is, if you see a Black Volga, you might want to run for your life because you could be the next victim. The boogeyman tiptoes into number 3 on our list. I think it's safe to say that almost every country has their own variation of the boogeyman. I know for me, the boogeyman, he lives under my bed. I'm not sure what he looks like because I don't dare look underneath there at nighttime. But if you're going to be talking about the Czech Republic's version of this, they refer to their boogeyman as a bubek. That's what they call the boogeyman. He is supposed to look like a terrifying scarecrow and makes chilling sounds of a crying baby in order to lure his unsuspected victim. That's one of the most creepiest things ever. When there's a full moon, he weaves a cloth from the souls of the people that he has stolen, and he drives a cart that is pulled by cats. The bubek's main target is misbehaving children, but he doesn't discriminate. He is it to eat anyone or anything that is foolish enough to cross his path. So I guess what I've learned from this urban legend is to not wander around creepy abandoned places when there is a full moon. I'm gonna do it when there's a half a moon. And if I ever hear a crying baby, I'm just going to run the other way. Okay, not really. The Gryla claws its way into number 2. This horrifying urban legend takes us all the way back over to Iceland. And after you hear about this legend, you probably want to avoid driving to Iceland during Christmas time. And that's because Iceland created a terrifying creature, and this creature is named Gryla, who is a giant troll with hooves for feet and has 13 tails. This creepy looking figure is always in a horrible mood, and she is constantly hungry for children. During each Christmas, Gryla comes out of her cave in order to hunt for misbehaving children. Once she finds them, she stuffs them into her sack, drags them to her cave where she boils them alive and adds their dead corpse to her favorite stew. I mean, what the heck is being taught in Iceland? Just tell your kids to be good. Don't be making up some urban legends crap for them to behave. I bet you this is pretty effective. I bet you everyone in Iceland, all the kids are like so behaved. Okay, the White Death brings us to number 1. I think we've done it again. I think we've saved the best for last year. This is an urban legend that originated in Scotland about a little girl who hated life so much that she wanted to destroy every trace and evidence that showed that she ever existed. I mean, this is some pretty messed up stuff, pretty deep. One day she decided to in her bedroom, and shortly after her family found out that she was dead, strange things began to happen. Every family member died within a few days after they discovered her body, except all of their limbs had been torn off. The legends say that when you learn about the White Dead, this little girl's spirit will find you, knock on your door until you answer. Each knock gets louder and louder until you finally open the door. But when you do, she will brutally murder you because she is scared that someone will tell someone else that she exists. So basically this little girl is very sinister and will stop at nothing to prevent people from knowing about her. So I guess we're all kind of screwed now. If you hear knocking at your door tonight, I suggest you guys don't answer. Yeah, I'm pretty freaked out right now.
Starting off at number 10 now, we have the Little Blue One. This is a story of Castillo di Montebello. On June 1st, 1375, the 5-year-old daughter of Lord Ugali Nuccio da Montebello was playing inside the house. Her name was Gwendolania. She was an albino who wasn't allowed out in the sun in case it damaged her skin. Her blue hair and blue eyes made everyone call her the Little Blue One. Now on this day, her father went upstairs to check on her and asked where the little girl was, but she was nowhere to be found. She had run after her cloth ball into the sprawling dark dungeon, never to be found again. Now locals believe her ghost still roams the castle, and that on summer solstice every 5 years, the Little Blue One calls out into the night. Next up at number 9 now, we have Pier Zanfretta. From 1978 to 1981, this Italian security guard was the victim of not 1, not 2, 3 or 4, but 5 separate alien abduction cases that took place in Genoa. After each time, he was regressed hypnotically and even voluntarily took truth serum in order to give a detailed and true account of the events. The abductions would always involve a group of aliens known as the Dragos, who were from the planet Zetonia. The first time, Zanfretta claimed to have seen 4 lights moving around in the garden of the house that he was commissioned to guard at that time. Suddenly, the engine, radio and lights of his vehicle all went out at the same time. He then saw 4 lights moving around the garden and presumed it was thieves come to rob the property. He crept through the gate, and just as he was about to confront the trespassers, he felt something touch his shoulder. He spun around quickly, and in his own words, he described what he saw as an enormous, green, ugly and frightful creature with undulating skin, as though he were very fat or dressed in a loose grey tunic, no less than 10 feet tall. In later interviews, he would also describe the creatures as hairy, with points on the side of their faces, round fingertips, and monstrous yellow triangular eyes. As I said in the beginning, this encounter was not the last one that he had. It would go on to become the stuff of legend in Italy and for the paranormal community worldwide. Next up at number 8 now, we have the Mouth of Truth. In the Paleo-Christian church of Santa Maria in Rome lies a statue called the Mouth of Truth. It was built by the Romans during the classical period and represents a river god with an open mouth, wide eyes, and a flowing mane of hair. Legend says that if a liar puts their hand in that statue's mouth and says a lie, they will lose their hand, just get bitten right off. The story goes that a rich wife of a Roman noble was accused of adultery. She denied the accusations, but her husband wanted to put her to the test, so he told her to put her hand inside the statue's mouth and say it. The wife had thought ahead of time though. She knew this was going to happen, and so, in front of the crowd at the statue, the man who was her secret lover embraced and kissed her. She then pretended that she didn't know him, accused him of being a madman, and the crowd chased him away. When she put her hand into the mouth, she declared that she had never kissed anyone except her husband and that madman who had just kissed her. Her hand was saved, but those who still suspected her believed that the hand must have lost its power. Many people still believe in its powers though, risking their entire hands to see if the legend still remains. Next up at number 7 now, we have The Crushing. The Sedele Anime is a house in Genoa that has been linked to a number of disappearances over the years. Some say that many years ago it served as an inn for travellers on the road between Lombardy and Piedmont. According to the story, the innkeeper there would always warmly greet travellers. He would give them hearty drinks, and then, when tiredness overcame them, he would suggest that they sleep in a particularly secluded room in the inn. Once the travellers would fall asleep, the ceiling would slowly begin to descend. By the time they woke up, they were being crushed against the ceiling. Once the travellers were dead, the innkeeper would dispose of their remains and gather whatever belongings they had to sell. For many years, these evil claims were dismissed, but they re-emerged when a bag of bones dating back to the 19th century were found near the house. Despite the creepy past, the house is still inhabited today, with supernatural occurrences happening on a regular basis. Next up at number 6 now, we have the Monastero Santa Radegonda. This old monastery in Milan sticks in the mind of anyone who visits it. It's a place that's not only known for its ghostly sightings, but also its ghostly sounds, specifically screams of torment. The story goes that in the late 14th century, Bernarda, daughter of Barnabo Visconti, was locked in the Rocchetta di Porta Nuova. How am I doing with the pronunciations, by the way, in this video? I feel bad for my editor. You guys don't have to see how many attempts this is taking me. I scripted that because I know it's true. Anyway, Bernarda, the daughter, was locked away because she was accused of adultery, a claim which even her father believed. Her confinement took its toll on her and she began to fade away, dying just a few months after being locked up. Now, they say her spirit roams the haunted church nearby. Many say they have seen her. Some even say they hear her anguished screams in the night, echoes of the pain she felt in the last pitiful months of her life. Moving on to number 5 now, we have The Beautiful Woman. There's an old legend surrounding the Villa di Corigliano near Pisa. You may recognize the name Pisa from the Leaning Tower of Pisa. If you ever intend on going there, perhaps stop by this place before you leave. According to the legend, the house is home to the ghost of Teresa della Celta Bocca Ghettini. In life, she was a beautiful woman from an ancient Pisan family. She was married to Count Cosimo Baldassari Agostini in 1755. They say that something bound her spirit not just to this mortal plane but to the very house itself. Those familiar with the house have reported seeing her move noble tapestries and ornaments or slamming doors and windows. On nights with a full moon, the lady has been known to appear on the avenue of the grounds driving a spectral horse-drawn cart. The current owners say that although she's been sighted outside of the house, that doesn't mean any peace for them, as they themselves claim to have heard her laughing in the cellar. Next up at number 4 now, we have Devil's Monk Monastery. This monastery can be found in Salerno. Legend says that a desperate wanderer once stopped by the entrance of the monastery asking for help one day. The monks did so, and the wanderer wanted to help repay them by working for them. He stayed with them for a long time and decided to become a monk himself. He was happy for a while, but eventually he fell in love with a local woman. The other monks claimed that she was a witch and warned him that she was a temptation sent by the devil. They tortured her to try and extract a confession. She never did though, and eventually died. Due to the loss of his love, the wanderer lost his mind and vowed to take revenge on the monks and the locals. People started disappearing around the town. One day a couple arrived at the monastery asking for help, just like the wanderer did all those years ago. The woman was never seen again, and the man was found dead with a broken skull. The wanderer was the one who welcomed them in. When the king learned what was happening, he sent soldiers to capture the madman. They hanged the demonic monk, and locals say his evil presence can still be felt in a monastery today. Coming at number 3 now, we have the mummies of Ferentilo. Below the church of Santo Stefano in Ferentilo lie buried bodies that have been preserved for a long time. Normally when I talk about preserved bodies in a video like this, it's due to humans using an embalming technique, usually for religious reasons. These bodies though were preserved by a rare microfungus that attacked corpses and turned them into mummies. Some of the mummies still have beards, teeth and hair. Among the dead are elderly people, a Napoleonic soldier, a murder victim, a mother with her child, and even 2 Chinese lover pilgrims who died during their travels around Italy. Despite the preservation being explained by natural causes, some say this place is very much unnatural and that the preservation is a sign of an aura that exists below the church, one which people like to avoid, especially if they hear whispers down there at night. Moving on to number 2 now, we have Ospedale Monte Catone. This hospital was designed by famous fascist Mussolini in 1930. It was initially a hospital that specialized in the treatment of tuberculosis. Try as they might, they couldn't save everyone. Locals began to believe that the old hospital was filling up with the spirits of those who had died there. As the hospital aged and its capabilities waned, a wing of the hospital was abandoned out of necessity. Naturally, this place has now become a hotspot for paranormal investigators from all over the world. Some ghost hunting teams have already explored the remains of the hospital and claim to have seen a little girl running down the hallways. They say this is one of the tuberculosis victims that we talked about earlier. Along with the sightings, the hospital has also been talked about in conversations about why it hasn't been renovated yet. Some people believe the authorities know more about its aura than they are letting on. And finally, number 1 now, we have Villa Clara. This villa in Ferrara is often held up as perhaps the creepiest and most haunted place in Italy. The first thing people notice when visiting is that because of its location and unique positioning, it's almost always shrouded in darkness and a natural fog, even on the brightest of days. This alone is enough to stop some locals from even walking past the house. But there's more. One story says that a girl called Clara was buried alive in the house by her own father. Nobody alive today knows the exact reason. Some say she was a clairvoyant and that her powers scared her father so much that he decided to end her life. Some people feel compelled to visit Villa Clara, knowing there is a small chance they will hear Clara herself crying out for help across the ages.
Starting off this countdown, we have the ghostly hand. Costanza Conti de Cupis was a very beautiful woman in the 17th century. She was often praised because she had beautiful hands. In fact, an artist even cast a mold of her hands, which he then displayed in his workshop. But that's not the creepy part. Apparently one day a stranger warned her that she was going to lose her hand very soon. Well, shortly after, she was sewing and she pricked her finger with a needle. This tiny prick turned into an infection which spread to her arm. As a result, she needed to have her whole arm amputated. Sadly, she eventually died of this infection. Now it's said that her presence lurks the streets of Rome. In fact, there have been numerous reported sightings of her apparition. Others say that when the moon shines on a window near Palazzo de Cupis, you'll be able to see her hand pressing against the glass window. Moving on at number 9, we have Beatrice Cenci. The ghost of Beatrice Cenci is probably the most well-known legend and famous ghost story in Rome. So, story goes that Beatrice had a very hot-headed and controlling father. Eventually, her and her family grew sick of his behavior and attitude, so they killed him. But police noticed his absence and eventually found his dead body. As a result, Beatrice and her family were sentenced to death. Now it's said that Beatrice's ghost appears every year on the night of her death, walking along the bridge that leads to the Castel Sant'Angelo. Some have even reported seeing her carrying her own head in her arms. crypts. In our 8th spot, we have Julius Caesar. Julius Caesar was a great and well-known emperor of the Roman Empire. He was killed on the Ides of March in 44 BCE. Now, his ashes were placed inside of a lead ball. In 1585, the Pope at the time opened it up to see if his ashes were really in there. Well, legend goes that when he did this, it released the ghost of Julius Caesar, because now his ghost roams the city. Get it? Roams the city. Sorry, that was lame. In fact, tons of people have seen his apparition near the Colosseum. Moving on at number 7, we have the Mouth of Truth. Near the foot of the Aventine Hills, there is a Roman statue that has been a very popular tourist attraction for years. The structure is an ancient stone mask, supposedly representing a Roman god. The mask has wide eyes and an open mouth. Now, legend goes that if a liar puts their hand inside the god's mouth, they will lose it. This legend dates all the way back to Roman times, when a wife of a Roman noble was accused of adultery. To prove her innocence, her husband wanted her to put her hand inside the stone mouth. If she was lying, she would lose her hand. Well, this little sneaky woman devised a plan with her secret lover. On that day, her lover kissed her by the statue in front of her husband. The woman then acted appalled and was like, it's a madman, and the crowd chased him away. She then stated that she's never kissed anyone else besides her husband and this madman, which technically wasn't a lie since her lover was the madman. So she put her hand in the mouth of truth and she didn't lose her hand and was found not guilty. Pretty clever woman. Coming in at number 6, we have the executioner. Mastro Tita was Rome's official executioner. He was responsible for putting more than 500 people to death. Now it's said that his restless spirit wanders around near the Castel Sant'Angelo. Apparently, in the early morning, you can see him in his red uniform wandering around. Now, others say that if you see him, he may offer you tobacco, but you must reject it, because Mastro would offer tobacco to the people sentenced to death just before he would decapitate them. We are now at our 5th and halfway mark with the 7th door to hell. Back in medieval times, it was thought that the famous Colosseum in Rome was one of the 7 doors to hell. In fact, it's said that after each gladiator fight, a man would dress up as the ferryman to the underworld. Basically, the ferryman for Hades that carries souls of the deceased to the world of the dead. Well, apparently, he would use a hot iron to test if the victim was truly dead. Then he would carry them through one of the doors in the Colosseum. That's how this legend came to life. Now, others say that the Colosseum is infested with ghosts of individuals who died during the fights. Every now and then you can hear sounds of heavy chains being dragged on the ground. And some have even saw ghosts walking around in the cellars. Moving on to number 4, we have the Temple of Beelzebub. Now, this is another urban legend surrounding the Colosseum. This time, it was thought that the Colosseum was dedicated to Beelzebub, the prince of all demons. According to the legend, in order to become members of his following, you would have to go into the Colosseum and answer the following question: do you adore Beelzebub? In fact, it is even thought that the name Colosseum was derived from this phrase. Coming in at number 3, we have the flaming carriage. Well, Rome is apparently filled with ghosts. This time, let's talk about the ghost of Olympia Marachina. When Olympia was 20 years old, she was married for the first time. But that marriage didn't last long because her husband died and she became very rich. Now, Olympia was very, very power hungry and eventually became the Pope's right-hand woman. Now, legend goes that just before the Pope died, she took 2 big cases of gold, stuffed it into her carriage, and fled. Now, people have reported seeing her dressed in all black, fleeing Piazza Navona while carrying her stolen gold. Others claim to have heard her shrieking in laughter while you can see her in a ghostly black carriage. In our 2nd spot, we have the Souls in Purgatory. So there's a museum in Rome called the Museum of Souls in Purgatory. Basically, it is filled with creepy objects that are apparently signed by souls trapped in purgatory. The artifacts include Bibles with handprints burned in, tabletops with fingerprints on it, and clothing with imprints on their sleeves. Some say that this is also from souls trying to communicate with their living relatives. Either way, this museum sounds pretty cool, and I would love to go there and check out all those artifacts. Who's with me? And in our number 1 spot, we have the Capuchin Crypt, another supposedly haunted area in Rome. And honestly, I can see why this one is haunted. This crypt contains 6 different chambers and thousands of human bones. In fact, 5 of the chambers are elaborately decorated with the bones of dead people. There are chandeliers made of the bones and wall decor. In fact, there's a crypt of skulls, crypt of pelvises, crypt of leg bones, and thigh bones. So I could see why this place is haunted. Like, they separated body parts from each other and then made it into decor pieces. So people have reported seeing shadowy figures, orbs have been caught in photos, and there have even been extreme hot and cold spots. On top of that, candles and torches have gone out entirely or would be caught flickering. Same thing happened when electricity was installed. Bulbs would flicker or would be blown out entirely. Pretty creepy.